What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Blade Dive. My name is Parker Bohan, and I am your host as always. I'm excited you're tuned in. And just a quick reminder, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, go ahead and do so. It would mean a lot to me. And leave us a review. If you've got 60 seconds out of your day, just a quick minute, hit us with a review. Let us know what you think. If you're stoked and you don't even want to write anything, just give us that 5-star review. We would love that. Okay. My guest today is Elia Hamilton. And I should note, too, this is the first time that I've ever had the opportunity to sit down and chat with Elia in depth. So thank you, sir, for your time. The Western Massachusetts native dude that he is, he grew up pretty much creating his own fun, building jumps for his tonka trucks in the dirt, exploring the outdoors. But, I mean, man, he's from the Northeast, so shout out to all the East Coast resorts. Elia is definitely representing. A competitive snowboarder at one point in his career, the snow industry was always a passion, and he eventually went on to contribute to companies like Peak Resorts and mountains like Mount Snow. Elia had the opportunity to be a part of Carinthia Parks and had some incredible operators around him there as well. Elia is definitely no stranger to building the skill sets of his team members and is all about sharing the knowledge of either operating snowcats, terrain parks, or life lessons. The man is truly a promoter of the industry and not necessarily himself, which I find super admirable. Elia has been a part of super park builds at Mammoth Mountain and has worked with some incredible influencers in the industry like Pat Morgan and Benny McGinnis. We also dive into his contribution to ASTM and what that standardization process looks like. It is quite the interesting conversation, so you're going to want to stay tuned. You know the deal. If you're at home, grab your favorite drink, kick your feet up, and if you're in the machine, turn up the volume.
Just go ahead and give it the juice. Already.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another day, another episode of the Blade Dive. And today with me in the virtual booth is, believe it or not, I personally think is someone that's a bit of a dark horse in the industry, but from such a empathetic approach with not only how he presents data, and he'll probably roast me for the way that I just said data, but he also is no stranger to advocating for park programs and has been around areas like Mount Snow, Peak Resorts, and was a key component to developing an incredible team at Carinthia. So without further ado, Elia Hamilton is my guest today on the show. Welcome, Elia. How are you?
Oh, Parker, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor.
I'm humbled to have you. Like I said, it's so cool to connect with people that I have watched do things and within the industry, and also I've been able to kind of close by be in the same room, you know. But to see how you've tackled your career has been quite the inspiration to, I think, not only me but many other people. So
That's so amazing. Yeah, I didn't actually think anybody was paying attention. So thank you so much. And you've had some great guests on already, and I'm really stoked to listen to more stories as time goes on.
well, I'll definitely raise my hand and say that I was paying attention to you. And it's me. But I think, along the lines of paying attention, what's really cool is that it's not like I just rattled off a bunch of stuff, some incredible accolades, but you were and have been in this game for quite some time. And we won't start chronologically, I guess. I think I want to know more, and I think the audience does too. Just you were around some pretty profound players in the game back in the late 90s that probably had some fantastic advice for your career. But I mean, you were put out there on the West Coast. You're from the East Coast, but you're being sent out there on the West Coast from memory, what we chatted about, to be around some individuals that were really launching the terrain park side of things and the event side of things. You want to maybe let us in on that story a little bit?
Yeah, really, the best piece of advice I ever got, I think, as a leader and coming from the first leader that I really had in the industry, Scott Pierpont, was to travel and see what other people are doing. Don't allow yourself to just be stuck in a box. You really need to see what your competition's doing. You need to see what your competition's doing on a global scale. And so he sent me out to Snow Summit in '99 to go check out what Gunny and Mike Bennell were doing out there. I doubt that they remember that visit as much as I do, but it really was kind of the jumping off point for a reality check for me as far as what was possible for my career and what was possible with snow and what was possible with running a program. Uh, it was just an amazing experience. And so he sent me out there just with the company credit card, and it was profound. I was blown away with not just the experience of using a company credit card to buy McDonald's, but also to, rent a car and realize there were chain restrictions on the way up to the hill and have to go back down and buy chains and then buy the wrong chains and then have to go back down the hill and return those and then finally make it up to Snow Summit at like midnight or whatever. And then to be able to go and see a program that was really just crushing it at the time. I mean, this was before social media, so the word of mouth even spread back then. We all knew back in Vermont where I lived that Snow Summit was the place to be, and you'd see it in videos and you'd see it in magazines, and it was just like, wow, these guys they must have the most amazing equipment and all the tools in the world and just can do whatever they want. And to go there and meet them and see what was actually happening and how much work it was, and to realize that they had the same crappy shop that we did and the same snowcats and the same stuff, and they were building amazing things. It was just eye-opening, and I'll never forget that. That piece of advice has really steered my career for the last 22 years since that point, for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, throw it out there. Let us know how long you've been. So it is 22 years. Damn, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, I started at Mount Snow in '98. I moved there after college. I got a photography degree, believe it or not, which is super handy
Dude,
for
wait,
Instagram.
hold on a minute. This is something that I did not know.
Oh, sorry to pop that on you. Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome, dude. So like the photography degree, talk about that for a second, just because I think that's a specific little niche. So do you still take pictures? Create images?
I love taking pictures. Yeah. And,
Oh, so cool.
mostly just for Instagram, but people are probably pretty sick of pictures of my dog by now. But I do take some
I,
snowcat pictures every once in a
I'm
while.
not I'm not sick of pictures of the dog. I love the dog, man. Keep posting those. Maybe jumping back real quick to just that specific piece of advice that you were discussing, just with respect to that adventure out there. I think the one thing that's cool that we talked about when we were catching up before jumping on is that you have had so many people that have entrusted you with really kind of the keys to the kingdom, and they believed in you and the directions you were headed in, and that really was just a fire lit underneath you and propelled you forward. I mean, yes, there were mistakes along the way for sure. Everybody makes them, but to have that piece of experience alongside the advice, that's pretty awesome, man. I think that's so cool. People believing in you is important for not only your psyche but pushing forward in your career.
Yeah, no doubt. And I often I think about it a lot, like I'm drawn to that style of leadership. So
Mm,
when I have an opportunity to be involved with a leader that it is apparent believes in that philosophy, I'm drawn to that because I do really better with some independence and some trust. I'm not a factory worker. I don't do well in situations where everything's the same every day. I really thrive in the problem solving environment. So leaders that have given me the opportunity to solve problems my own way and just ask for an end result, but allow me to get to that point in my own way. Those are the leaders that I've stuck with and have been loyal to. There have been other leaders along the way who want me to be a factory worker, and those situations just generally don't last that long.
Yeah, and we've talked previously in other episodes too about just folks needing kind of that specific autonomy to be able to function. Because when you start to put a lid on people, that's where you see things kind of really fizzle out. For lack of a better term, there you're putting out a fire. It's probably lit underneath somebody that's motivated when you don't really understand what their drive and motivation is. So I think it's fantastic that you had leadership along the way like that.
Yeah, and that's really where, it kickstarted my career in the snow industry, just this one trip, and then follow that up with the fact that X Games came to Mount Snow in 2000 the following year, and now all these guys that I was really looking up to but didn't really know very well were suddenly at my home resort building on my park trail, and I'm like, it doesn't really get much better than that. Um, I learned so much. I'd been only doing it for 2 years at that point. I mean, I was a competitive snowboarder there before, but I had only really been creating for a couple years at that point. And to see those guys roll in, Mike Bonnell, Jeff Flood, and just transform my trail. It was mind blowing. It completely changed the way that I did everything from that point forward, for sure. Frank Wells was there building pipes. I mean, talk about a legend, that guy. And the nicest guy in the world, by the way. Frank, you're the greatest. Thank you.
Dude, I would agree with that 100%. I had never met Frank until the podcast conversation that we had, and just such a nice guy. Such a nice guy. Maybe let's talk about that full circle a little bit. So your journey with and heading out to California and experiencing that, and then seeing X Games kind of unfold at your home resort was obviously incredible. But to back up a little bit and just maybe paint a picture of you growing up, if you want to get into your childhood or your experiences of what it was like being on snow and in the Northeast, what was that like?
Oh man, I mean, being raised by wolves in the wild forest of Western Massachusetts it doesn't get much better.
That's awesome.
No, my parents were total hippies. They bought some land and bought an old tobacco barn in Western Mass, and they disassembled the tobacco barn, and my dad and my uncle built two houses next to each other, and so I was born in that house with a midwife.
What?
Yeah,
No,
fully.
dude, that is so cool. So your family was tight. It wasn't like that was just, I don't know how well I would do with my cousins living right next to me or something like that. I like the space.
Oh yeah, I did have cousins right next to me though, and I had my uncle right next to me who grew tons of weed, and that's a story for a different podcast. But it was cool. I mean, I think a lot of because I thrive with autonomy comes from growing up really by myself. I grew up in Western Mass, and I was by myself pretty much all the time, either or usually with my dog back then. And we would just go explore in the woods, and I still behave that way. I mean, that's what I'm doing now. I just happen to make money doing it for now.
You're still having fun irrespective. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really good childhood. It was a good place to grow up. There wasn't a lot to do, so you had to kind of make your own fun. I spent hours and hours and hours every day underneath the front porch playing in the dirt and building jumps for my Tonka trucks and building bobsled tracks for golf balls and just shaping dirt. And it when I look back, so many of the things that I did when I was a kid are the things that I do professionally now. And no matter how much a parent can try to encourage a child to develop skills for a career, nobody would ever have been able to predict that was useful, what I was doing.
Wow, that's such a good point. I think it's hilarious sometimes. This is a little bit on topic, but when my wife and I were going to be new parents, it's amazing how much unsolicited advice you get from people. I
Mhm.
just loved that.
You did actually
And
love
when
that?
you Oh, no, I'm being completely 100% sarcastic.
Okay, good.
I had one person that actually asked me one time, "Hey, man, what can I, if you got any advice for me for being a new parent?" And I said, "No, I don't have any. Like, you already should know who you are." Um, but and that's me. Like, I'm no filter, and I just think that that's such a good point. When you push your kid in a direction, you mean you just never know. But yeah, that's so cool that you had that autonomy as a kid. I didn't have that. I was
Oh,
sheltered.
man. Oh, no, we were like yeah, we were latchkey kids by definition, only we weren't in the suburbs, we were in the hill towns, so, yeah. My
Cool.
mother and stepfather worked nights in the restaurant business, so we were on our own
Sweet.
for sure, and my sister absolutely hated me.
No. Really? Man, you're such a lovable
Oh,
guy.
yeah.
What's not lo
Oh, we get along great now, but
That's awesome, that's awesome. So growing up in Western, Massachusetts, right?
yeah, yeah, Berkshire East,
Yep.
that was my home mountain back in the day, yep.
Awesome. And then so that I was gonna ask too, snowboarding, terrain parks, and I mean you're building stuff for your Tonka trucks and kind of envisioning what possibilities may be. What was that first piece of exposure to the snow world, the snow industry that we know as skiing, snowboarding, parks, going downhill really fast?
Well, so in 7th grade, um, I joined the ski team because I loved skiing. Like it was my family was a skiing family, a classic New England, skiing family. My grandmother taught me how to ski when I was little, and um, it's just part of what you do. If you grow up in New England, like if you don't ski or snowboard, like I don't even know what you do with your life in the winter because it's miserable. Um, so yeah, I joined the ski team and I was a ski racer, 7th through 12th grade. It was the only sport actually that I stuck with. I sucked at ball sports and didn't like team sports. And but we had a bus ride to the mountain every day, Monday through Friday. We'd hop on the bus. We had our own bus. The mountain was 10 minutes away, and we would go. And you had to do 2 mandatory training runs. That was what the basic expectation. And there were tons of kids well, our ski team was amazing. We were state champs like every year forever. And you had to do 2 mandatory training runs, and there were definitely kids that did more than that. But I was like, okay, what's the basic number of runs that I need to do? 2, sweet. And then I would go like just ski, and I would build jersey booters and side hits and build jumps over rope lines into the dark. And like me and my buddies we'd smoke cigarettes on the chairlift, and like it was just magical. It was so good. And then our parents would come and pick us up like at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Um, and then we'd go there on the weekends. I mean, we were there full time, all the time.
Wow.
So, yeah, I was a lousy racer, but it's all good.
I was gonna ask, were you all about it? Were you like grease lightning? Were you going super fast and winning everything, or were you definitely the
No,
minimalist and going, "Yeah, I've finished. That's me. I'm going to do
that
something
was
else."
me all day. Yeah,
Cool.
I wasn't really competitive, and B, I didn't really care, and I refused to put on a skin suit. Never ever did I put on a skin suit. So I was
Did you
flapping
race in
away.
what were you I was gonna say, what were you racing in? I would have been the guy in jeans and a t-shirt. I would have been
Well, no, I mean I had snow pants and a jacket, but they were loose fitting because I wanted the mobility to be able to learn how to do helicopters,
Yeah,
when you called them helicopters and daffies and spread
yeah.
eagles and stuff. Um,
So cool.
Snowboarding
That's
wasn't
awesome.
allowed until my senior year in high school there. So the first year that they allowed it is when I learned how to snowboard, and I would ride the bus, with the ski team, and I'd go do my 2 mandatory training runs, and then I'd put on my snowboard gear and I'd go beat the crap out of myself trying to figure it out.
Were you ever doing anything prior to that? Were you experimenting with maybe something like, just inventing something instead of getting something that was made by a manufacturer and trying to go down the hill sideways?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Me and my buddies. Again, we were all kind of. I don't want to disparage the term latchkey kid because we had great parents. My mom was amazing. All our parents were amazing, but they just let us go, and so we would spend all day and all night out in the snow with sleds and shovels and whatever implements we could find It's kind of how we treated drugs too. Like we smoked banana peels and did all kinds of stupid stuff. But uh,
Awesome.
so yeah, we were skateboarders ultimately, and snowboarding wasn't a thing. Like it didn't really exist when we were
Yeah.
kids. To our knowledge, I know it existed on in some of the great places, but we didn't know anything about it. So we were just trying to figure out how to stand sideways on pretty much anything we could find. Um, and logically, to us, a skateboard is something you stand sideways on. So we would put like leather straps. We would screw leather straps to a blank skateboard deck uh, and try to go down our sledding runs. And it really didn't work very well, but we loved it anyway.
Yeah, I definitely had the Walmart special at one point in time. I totally did.
Oh man, I don't mean to put you down.
I totally did. I totally did. It was like, well, this isn't working. Oh, I ate so much shit with the skateboard and the shoestrings because it just wouldn't go. Like, I mean, come on, the snow consistency and packing it down, it's just like sledding. When you're a kid, you're like whoop de doo, and get out there and try to go down. Oh, I ate it so hard. But yeah, totally. After that, upgrade to the Walmart special. So, yeah, man, good times growing up.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I think it's awesome that your parents and you kind of realized yourself that because of your upbringing, you were really that was your strong suit. You realized who you were early on and what you needed to excel in the career of interest that you wanted to take off in. And I'm really trying to hit this question with everybody. And when people, and it's only because I've had this question put to me and I didn't even know what to say. When people start describing themselves or are asked to describe themselves with maybe who they are, that defines them and has nothing to do with their job, because usually people start talking about their job first when they're like, yeah, I worked here and I worked there and I did that. They go down that chronological list of things that they've accomplished, but maybe what defines you that has nothing to do with terrain park operations?
Oh yeah, not to talk about my childhood too much, but I think ultimately, so I started working for my mother and my stepfather when they bought a restaurant when I was 13, and it was like one of these small hometown restaurants that did breakfast, lunch, and dinner um, 7 days a week. So it was just kind of a madhouse. And I started there when I was 13. That's the first year I was allowed to work in the state of Massachusetts, and just going there after school, working like 20 hours a week, and gradually, worked my way through the system. But they didn't necessarily treat me in any kind of special way. I busted my ass and I learned a lot about my work ethic and my attitude from that experience. It's just, it's a high stress environment with difficult personalities, and there were really no excuses. You just had to get the job done. You had customers coming in, so you had to deal with your emotions. And also at the end of the day, like every dollar counts. When I broke a plate, I would get screamed at, like, and it's not because I did something wrong. It was because, hey, that costs money. Like, you can't just, this isn't somebody else's money here. And that's defined me, even though I work for companies and I work for ski resorts and, I worked for American Skiing Company. Like, who cares about them? Um, it was so instilled in me that this is your business. This is your money. This, or you have to make the right decision. That's a lot of where my approach to things has come from. I'm pretty frugal and I like to work hard, and I feel like people should be able to do anything, and that's just kind of driven me all along,
Yeah, and
for
that's
sure.
awesome too. Like, you know, realizing that is at a young age and seeing all that unfold right there in front of you to realize that, hey, yeah, this is a business. It's a job, and I have to be held accountable and be responsible. And then really letting that kind of in a little bit. It's not like it's I think so often like people get caught up in I think the loss almost or the difficulty of something, but when you let that failure in a little bit or the realization of what the reality is, it's almost like you're getting relative with the situation. You definitely allow that portion of the experience to kind of go, oh, okay, okay, that was cool. I think that's super commendable, man. The fact that you were realizing that and then given that opportunity too, at such a young age, it's awesome.
Yeah, it also, it gave me a drive, because it let me know that, anything's possible really. And I referred to this kind of analogy before that, I'm a porcupine quill. And once I'm in, I'll continue to be stuck there and work my way deeper. And eventually you'll either rip me out or I'm going to cause an infection. And I'm not going to give up until either one of those things happens. And I think that comes from my experience just working in the family business.
Yeah, that's thanks for letting us in on that, man. I think that that's such a cool component of who you are. A lot of times, like I said, people aren't, I think, as willing to open up about who they are and what their experiences are that have defined them. The conversation typically goes job, marriage, kids, whatever that is, whatever that outline looks like. And there's more to an individual. I think once you peel back those layers within that are the
Mm.
onion, to kind of have a real take on who the individual and what the individual is all about.
Mm.
So that's huge. Thanks for sharing, man. That's big. I had no idea
Yeah,
that.
thanks. I mean, I've been trying to figure it out my whole life, but just to try to define why I'm so crazy.
I don't know if it's crazy. I think it's realist, really. I mean, I'm going to put it that way. I think you're a realist. I think that you're great at getting relative with your situation. I've thought that from a business perspective in the terrain park world about you. So yeah, that's a super cool story. This is a bit of a deep blade dive right there too. For sure. So, speaking of kind of maybe not necessarily equipment, but just moving on, not fast forwarding too far, but Mount Snow, your involvement there, but kind of where it began and your excitement about jumping on board there.
Yeah, it really happened pretty organically. I got out of college with my photography degree, and a bunch of my friends had moved up there already, and I, had a college pass and stuff. And when I got out of college, um, I was like, yeah, I want to go up there too. And we all got elected onto the snowboard team. It was the Ride On snowboard team, and so we all competed together and traveled together and everything. But I also had kind of a side gig as a photographer when we weren't competing. And there were a couple other great photographers there too, like Gary Land and um, some others that I really looked up to. But Mount Snow would pay for my film and processing, and then they'd use my photos in the collateral. And so that kind of got me in deeper with the marketing department who ran parks at the time. And so between that and the fact that the team riders, we would ride with Kathy, the snowcat operator who built the parks, to kind of describe what we wanted to see as the team, and we were kind of leading that charge. And um, then in '98, I was actually out at Hood. I went out to Hood a bunch when I was in the early mid '90s for the summer. Worked at Timberline Lodge, washing dishes, blah blah blah, poaching camps.
Sweet.
Actually, I have a side story I have to tell. It was
No,
that
dive
summer.
into it.
Yeah,
Dive
it was
into it.
'97. The summer before '97, we were all out at Hood washing dishes and cooking in the Timberline Lodge, and then we'd go poach the camps during the day. So we all worked at night and poached camps during the day. But that was the year that they were training for the '98 Nagano Olympics, and
Mhm.
they had built the perfect pipe up on the glacier.
Oh
And
no.
so, and it was I think 17-foot HPG pipe at the time,
Oh boy.
and we all get wind of that, and we see them building it over in this other canyon over yonder. And so me and a bunch of other total scumbag dishwashers and waiters like hiked up there in the afternoon after we heard this thing was done, and came over this rise, and there's this pristine, the best half pipe we'd ever seen. Everything was like hand carved up to that point.
Wow.
We've been
Yeah, yeah.
riding these hand carved pipes out at Hood, and we were kind of pipe jocks too. And we get up there, and there's this pristine, beautiful, freshly salted 17-foot super pipe with nobody in it. and we proceeded to shred the shit out of that thing. Like just before the sun's going down. Like it was just the most amazing experience. We were all just like beside
Oh,
ourselves.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden we hear this rumble, and one of their Thigh-Call sprites, the blue ones, the people carriers that they
Yep.
probably still run right now, came rolling over the bottom hill, and it was the U.S. coach with like Ross Powers and all these other athletes and photographers, and they were going to do a photo shoot on this pristine pipe that we had just completely destroyed.
Oh
I
my
mean,
goodness.
it was rutted, it was fucked, man.
But did you guys get away, or was it more or less just like,
No.
oh,
So
you stood there? Wow. How did that? Wow.
we were just shell shocked. We didn't even really know what to do. And the coach comes up. I can't remember his name. I know he's famous, and I should know his name, and I don't right now. But he was like, his head was exploding. There were flames coming out of his eyeballs. He was
Wow.
so angry. But he calmed down and he said, "Okay, here's your penance. You have to stand in the background while Ross airs over you, and you have to make like ooh and ah faces the whole time." So we ended up being like the backdrop for the Ross Powers Olympic photo shoot.
That is one hell of a story.
It was sick.
That is awesome. I think that was everyone's dream, when you're a kid or a younger lad or gal in the snow world, in the industry, and you're like, oh man, where is the thing that is going to be? Oh, there it is, and you're like, there's a pristine pipe. Somebody else might be like, there's a rail, or there's a. Was there no interaction from anybody other than the coach and the sprite coming up the hill? That was it, and he was just like, hey, you got to be the backdrop for this photo, and you got to do this in the backdrop, and that was it. That was the penalty.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm
That's
simplifying,
awesome.
but we all knew Ross Powers because he was from Stratton, and we were
Yeah,
all from Mount Snow. I mean, we weren't friends, but we knew who he was, and we're like, oh, it's just Ross. Like, who cares?
yeah,
Come on. Yeah, he's a
yeah.
six snowboarder, but whatever.
Oh man, that's so cool.
So then the next summer in '98, I was there, and I heard so parks were run at Mount Snow through the marketing department. Like they ran the parks up until that point, but I heard a rumor that they wanted to move it over to mountain operations and they wanted to hire somebody. So I made a phone call and got an interview with Scott Pierpont, who I mentioned earlier, and he hired me over the phone. And so when I got back, I was put into the lift department as a lift supervisor who ran the terrain parks. And so I would pick out a couple lifties every day. We would go, you know, put up fences and rake the jumps and mark the jumps and do all that stuff. And then at night, I would go out with the CAT operators and kind of talk to them about what I wanted to see. And they got sick of that pretty quickly, actually. They were over me riding with them. And then one day, the grooming manager took a set of keys for a BR plus ME, or MP rather, not an ME, thankfully. And he just threw the keys at me, like literally threw them across the room at me, and was like, "You go fucking do it." I'm
Oh
like,
wow.
"Okay."
Yeah, you're like, all right, man, I'll give it a shot. At least it has the microchip in it, and I don't have to feather the throttle.
Right, I don't have to have those boat sticks between my legs, but
Yeah.
yeah, he didn't really give me any training or anything, and I just worked. I worked like 100 hours a week for a couple years, like up until that X Games moment, where, and even beyond that, because then of course I had to do more, but I just worked my ass off, and because I knew there was nobody else behind me to pick up the slack, and I didn't have any kind of equipment background at all, like nothing. That was not part of my life. I didn't even really mow the lawn when I was a kid because we were hippies in the woods.
Yeah.
So no equipment experience, nothing. The only reason I developed any skills is because I didn't have a choice. Like there was no backup. There was nobody there to save me. Like the park had to be open and I had to get it done and I had to stay there till it got done. So I started to develop tricks and methods of getting it done. Yeah, I built some horrible stuff for sure.
Were you drawing on kind of like what we discussed earlier, your understanding that there was a business, a deliverable, and something that had to be done in between to make it all a reality, a
Oh yeah,
process.
that was
Yep.
always the case. Like my drive was always, this park has to be open tomorrow, and because that's what this business is about. This business isn't about how rad I am at building things. This business is about people having that product tomorrow because they're paying for a lift ticket. And in the restaurant business, I think the one thing that kills a lot of restaurants is inconsistency. And like when people show up thinking you're open and you're not open, or they show up expecting one menu but you've changed it, that kills restaurants. And it kills me to see resorts do that too. Like if you say it's there, it's got to be there. And I don't care as a customer what it took you to get that done. Like that's your problem. I paid for this. I want to see it. So that's been like the core of everything for me. And guys that have worked for me will tell you like, Jesus, the deadlines, dude, chill. But I'm like, no, this is what it's all about.
Yeah, no, and I will be the first to attest that there is one location here in town that if they would put that item back on the menu, we would be well beyond our means for what we spend on food weekly. But it hasn't been back on the menu, so we're good. um,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. There's definitely there's a big component to being able to kind of actions speak louder than words. Your deliverable is there, and then what you mentioned something else too, like the not necessarily the pressure, but there's a deliverable that's there. There's a deadline in place, and then trying to manage a team to get that all accomplished is probably one of the hardest things to do. I think it's definitely difficult.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I was naturally good at it at the beginning, and I wasn't naturally good at operating a snowcat, and I wasn't naturally good at leading teams, but I really tried not to make the same mistakes twice. So
Doing the same thing more than once and expecting a different result is almost the definition of stupidity
I think it's insanity, right?
or insanity, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
There
That's
you go. I'm not brilliant. I couldn't. I couldn't. There's like I would often, and maybe you can. I think that I've been stuck so many times on going, okay, I know this one way. We're gonna keep doing it this one way until somebody finally was able to say, like, hey, man, this is a different way of doing it. And if you can just open up a little bit and let that perspective in, and I think that kind of leads into that next question I wanted to ask, which is the other operators that you were around before we kind of jump into the advancement in your career. Like, who are some of the folks that you were around in those early days and even the later days that really helped kind of shape your perspective on doing it a different way?
Yeah, I have to say that there were so many. There were guys that I worked with at Mount Snow that actually treated me with some modicum of respect. Bucky Boyd, was the winch operator back when I started, and they wouldn't let me run the winch, so I would ride with him, and he was so smooth and so productive that I would fall asleep in the passenger seat. Like he would like rock me to sleep like a baby while he was like building landings and in runs for me that I couldn't do. And he was amazing. Like he was just a classic, wonderful long beard Vermonter with a horrible temper who used to just like punch the joystick out of the snowcat every once in a while because he'd get so mad. But such a good dude, and actually a whole family of really good dudes. The Boyd family, that is from. Not, there's two different Boyd families. There's the Peak Resorts Boyd family that I'll probably talk about, but then there's the Wilmington Westover Boyd family who have had a huge impact on grooming in that whole region. And just a side note, sadly, twin brothers Cleon and Leon Boyd passed away from COVID last spring, and just kind of a real tragedy for the area. But shout out to the Boyd family, and Bucky Boyd was a huge influence on me. Another guy, Bill Armstrong, call him Pitt, um, was kind of the pack leader. He used the Pied Piper for the pack groomers, and he had like this long, like Led Zeppelin curly hair, and just an infectious laugh. And was kind of mean to me for sure in the beginning, but we developed a relationship over the years, and he's just an incredible equipment operator on the fleet grooming side that would just rip out edges of trails, and there would be like pine boughs and random branches, like because he was just so aggressive,
Just
and
reckless.
he would
Yeah.
just reel out the edges of the trails going uphill on the steepest trails and just like laugh about it, and like it was. And he would, yeah,
Oh,
you
that's
try to
awesome.
chase him around the mountain, and it was just basically impossible. I still don't think I could do it, but then
Wow.
in the outside world, like snowboarding, but in the mid '90s, Sugarloaf was like the unsung hero of East Coast parks, and that's when Eric Rosenwald was there. And I didn't know a lot about park building or how to do it at that time, but I know that when we went to Sugarloaf, like that place was amazing. And if Sugarloaf were in Southern California during that time, like Sugarloaf would have been the spot, but it's not. It's up near the Canadian border in Maine.
Yeah.
Like nobody goes there. It's 40 below in the middle of winter. Like, but he did such an amazing job, and he influenced me in ways that I didn't even understand probably until later. Um, but just super amazing for sure.
Yeah, I gotta throw in a quick shout out for Eric too. And you're hitting the nail on the head. In so many ways was he an influence on me that I didn't realize until later on. And I'm sitting there going, oh, that's 100% why he told me that. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. But
Yeah.
yeah, I agree, man. I remember seeing pictures of Sugarloaf and going, whoa. Um, yeah, that was definitely cool. I wish I would have gotten the opportunity to get up there when I was younger. Never did though.
Yeah, it's a long way away,
Yeah,
but
it is. It's a journey.
so then
Def-
after that, I mentioned the X Games stuff and like having those heavy hitters come to my ski area for 2 years. Mike Bonnell, Frank Wells, and Jeff Flood, one of the just kindest men I've ever met who could push more snow than anybody I've still ever seen, really. Um, those guys just completely opened my eyes to a different world. And then Elliot Cohn came later, like with the Do Tour, and I had the opportunity to jump in the cat with him. This was like 2000, I don't even remember, 9, 10, maybe something, 8, I don't know. But I hopped in the cat with him, and he was using an inclinometer to shoot grades from. He was lining up the knuckles of multiple features in the slopestyle course and shooting the grade between those knuckles. And I'm like, oh, like
yeah.
this is an analytical way of understanding how the riders, what kind of speed the riders are going to maintain, not by looking at the underlying slope, but looking at like where they're landing and ignoring the everything in between, but just saying like, this is the actual slope. Like,
Mm,
and it was, oh, we can actually use tools like and measure things. Like, wow, we don't have to just be artists. That's pretty cool, actually. That was really eye opening for me too. Um, and then beyond that, I mean, really, the guys that have worked for me over the years, they're inspirational people. Ken Gator, Dave Franzen, Benny McGinnis. They all had very unique visions and very different ways of doing things. And I think ultimately, one of the things that Gator really taught me was to let go. And he's like, hey, man, just leave me alone. I promise you, you don't have to control everything. And once I did that, he showed me a different perspective on building and like what we could accomplish and what features could look like. And
yeah.
he built like one of my favorite things he built was we called it the 420, and it was 4 20-foot jumps that were super tight. I mean, it was the worst grooming experience in the world. Like there was no the transition of the landing led into the transition of the takeoff on the
Oh yeah,
next one.
that's incredibly fun grooming right there. Inc-
Miserable. I think we
You're
broke
stoked.
paths there. But it was the funnest thing. I'm like, man, I never would have done that because it's such a pain in the ass. Like I was allowing the logistics side of me to
Mm,
prevent me from building like creative and fun features. And then Dave Franzen came in and just completely exploded my brain with skate park style, sideways everywhere. jib setups that I never would have envisioned, and like that worked really well, and people had a super good time. It was fun. Carinthia was like mad fun. And then Benny McGinnis coming in, he's the jump builder. I mean, built the most beautiful jumps, medium and large jumps. And for the years that he was there, that's the riders were progressing. You could watch it because of the jumps that he was building. And bringing a little bit of, he came from Sierra at Tahoe, so bringing a little bit of the West Coast jump style back to the East with the more raised knuckles and the, more roller style jumps with raised knuckles with higher trajectories. Like, you didn't see that a lot in the East. We were still kind of in step down land and tabletop land.
Yeah.
And he brought it in, and the riders responded to it, and it was awesome to watch. Really cool.
That's so cool. I think one of the most incredible points that you brought up when we were catching up was the fact that you have all those experiences and you have all those memories of how you were able to really kind of quantify, and then process, and then move beyond your analytical reasoning to kind of push your perspective in a different direction. But now in this 21st century age that we have, you've got something like Instagram out there, and you can immediately consume as much as you want, that it's so difficult to quantify. You're going, whoa, this person's doing this over here. This person's doing this over here. Wow. And I just think that was a really cool way for you to kind of put it into perspective from your experiences now to this, digital world. I talk about being an analog guy a lot of the time, and here I am doing a podcast. But I did have the opportunity to, I think this is a good time for a special guest question. I did have the opportunity to catch up with one of those individuals that you mentioned, and that was Mr. Dave Franzen. Just to kind of, I definitely like doing my due diligence for these episodes, and he actually just was so cool. He mentioned that you were really efficient with the machine, and it was almost as if you were doing this dance when you and he were working together, kind of like a waltz, where it was just playing out. I've got a guest question. I think it's a great time for a guest question right now, and I'll go ahead and play it for you. And it's from Mr. Dave Franzen himself. I think you're going to like it. Here it is.
Oh, boy.
Hamilton, what's the story with you and Wheelcats in the park and one of your favorite girls, Ruby?
Man, I am totally down with Wheelcats.
That's awesome.
I have no problem with Wheelcats at all. Like, that's cool with me. I've definitely run, well, especially winches. Like, I have no problem with running a wheel winch, because really all I'm doing is going backwards and forwards the whole time. When I have to start turning around a bunch, I get pretty bummed out. But in push roads and uphill winch work, I'm cool with it. When we were out at Super Park at Mammoth, I think our cat went down or something like that, and I asked TJ, hey, do you have anything else available? And he basically pointed me over to a Trash Cat, which was an old wheel 600. He's like, yeah, sure, you can have that. I think it was missing its like blade screens and everything. And
sick.
I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. So I took that thing up to, we were building like a monster jump up top. I hopped in that thing and got in the push road and dozed with it for like 8 hours. No problem.
Sick.
Whatever.
That's awesome. No, I think that's something it keeps coming up, man. It doesn't matter what machine you're in, it doesn't. It really, really doesn't.
No, I wouldn't try to do fancy finish work with it, but like, so this is what's available. This is the tool that's available at the time. Okay, how can I be productive with this tool? I'll go do this. I don't need to do that. I'll go do this right now, and I'll go get that done, because this machine will do fine for that. And then hopefully later we get our Park Pro back and we can go fix some stuff up,
Yeah, and one of the other things that Dave and I caught up about was he was super stoked on just getting to spend some time with you on your trip to Germany, and how incredible that was. But he also said you guys kind of like got into some good trouble there, whether it was hanging out afterwards or whatever. But how much you ever want to tell us about the trip to Germany, man? Fill us in there too.
Oh, that was a super rad trip. It was like, yeah, Piston Bully invited us out there, and it was Day, Ken Gator, Clayton Shoemaker, Eric Rosenwald, Marty, don't remember his last name, from Whistler, Jay Scambio, Jay Ridd, and Dennis McGibney. And it was basically like a bunch of park guys that they brought out there to talk about park cats. And this was before the Park Pro. And so we just had epic experiences driving around in European diesel minivans, which are the coolest vehicles in the world, by the way. And going to just Austria and just going to these amazing places and hanging out with just a bunch of heavy hitter park guys. Like, it was just this gathering. And yeah, we would sit down and write out our ideas on napkins. Like, there were definitely some things with the new Park Pro that I'm not saying we should take credit for it, but there were things that we discussed, like the back blade edge, and some better chain tie off points, and little things that we said this isn't that hard. I think Day was always asking for the hot dogger, for the hot dog warmer to be on the dashboard.
Cool.
I don't know why they haven't done that yet, but
Oh man.
it was just super inspirational, super cool. And yeah, we definitely went out into the red light district. And to be honest, and I'm not just saying this, but those places don't really do it for me. So I usually go home and go to bed before everybody else.
Yeah, no, not for me either. I mean, yeah, whatever the culture and seeing that, but nah, no, I'd definitely be into some other stuff for sure too. I bet you took some pictures while you're out there. Did you take your camera?
I did. I have some good pictures from that, actually. Yeah, some really good ones. You can just imagine, like, we just roll. So it's always like an overnight flight, and so we roll into Munich like with zero sleep, and you got a bunch of park guys at heart. I mean, yeah, we're all professionals at this point, but there's that dark little corner on the insides of our minds. Rolling into Munich, like, after not sleeping for 24 hours, to a city that none of us speak the language. We have no idea what's going on, and we're just like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that guy Marty was, oh man, he was a handful. It was wild,
Sick.
super fun.
Sick.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, anytime you go to a foreign country, I can only imagine um, what that experience is like, not being able to speak the language. You're there, you have a purpose for being there, right? But you got to have people help navigate you kind of towards that meeting or whatever the dinner is or what's going on, like there's things that have to happen. And yeah, that would have been cool though, like not knowing the language and going, okay, like I got to pick up maybe how long were you there? Was it a week? Was it like 2 weeks, a couple days, or
Yeah, I think it was like 5 days,
sweet?
5 or 6 days. It was pretty good. It was long enough that we kind of acclimated. But I mean, on the Austria is just the most amazing place. I would move there in a heartbeat. Like, I am just inspired by the landscape. We would go up and stay in these little mountain towns, like these little yodel communities, like, where you're in this steep valley and it's all lush green farmland, and like every inch of the hillside has been manicured because it's been farmed for so long. And especially in like Switzerland, it's like, it's insane. The land's been worked for so long, and it's so gorgeous. And then you go up to these glaciers in the Alps, and you're just like, where am I? This is crazy,
Dude, so for
and the
maybe
people.
I was gonna say real quick, sorry to interrupt. Maybe the one thing that people who do know this movie, but like the Sound of Music, like wasn't it filmed in Austria?
Yes, totally. Yeah,
Dude, so like
yeah.
you're probably sitting there if you've seen that movie going, this is pretty magical.
That's
I'm gonna
exactly what it's like. I mean, I was basically singing the whole time I was there.
nice, man. But I can only imagine I would have done the same thing. I would have literally rolled in there and been like, okay, I mean, I'm going to walk 5 feet and take that picture, and then I'm going to walk another 5 feet and take that picture. And I would have been nerding out on the views. I really would have. I just think that
Yeah,
experience would have been so cool. So
it's
cool.
impossible not to nerd out on the views, because I mean, I haven't traveled all over the world or anything. I've traveled every inch of the United States, but Europe is amazing. I mean, they've, like, the infrastructure, there's no like power lines anywhere. Everything's underground. The buildings are all really old, but they're really well kept. And like when you go to a hotel or like at one of these family inns in the mountains, like your bed is tiny and you have like a feather bed, and like it's just a completely different way of life that I really appreciate and can totally get into.
It's so different that it seems more authentic almost. I guess that's the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's so cool that you went and did that. Yeah,
Yeah, I've
that's
been out there.
awesome.
I went out on another trip a few years later that was a little bit shorter, and but equal amount of debauchery. So if anybody ever asks you to go on one of these like sales trips, like a a supplier sales trip to Europe, like I would not turn it down.
Say yes, make it work.
Yes, make it work.
Make it work.
Do it.
That is
Yeah.
awesome. Well, big shout out to Day. That was awesome. Him taking the time to catch up, and he thinks the world of you. And it's awesome that you guys have kind of helped each other out along that way of your career, and just kind of seeing that bigger picture and doing the dance, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Day. Love you, buddy.
All right, so I know that yeah, snowboarding, skiing, huge part of your life. There's obviously people that have impacted you in certain areas, not only in your personal life, but within the industry. But who is maybe someone that's had the biggest impact on you outside of the ski and snowboard world?
I mean, that definitely goes without question. It's my wife, Roxanne. She really challenges me every day to become a better person, maybe, and even just be the person that I am. Like she really values my skills and she lifts me up with everything that I do, not just in the work world, but like I love to cook, and she encourages that and is really complimentary about that. And the work that I do on outside the house, like building trails and just being kind of a home keeper. She challenges me all the time. And I think that ultimately the things that attracted me to her were she brought back all of these activities in life that I enjoyed as a young person that I had gotten away from. Like when I met her, um, pretty early on into our relationship, I moved up to Lake Placid to work this event called the Great Outdoor Games. And so I was living a little further away. And she said to me really early on, like, I like to ride my bike. And I'm like, okay, so this chick likes to ride her bike. Cool. Well,
Nice.
she's like a cycling fanatic. And when I was a
That's
kid
awesome.
and all through high school, like I was super into riding my bicycle, and mountain biking came around and I was super into mountain biking. But then I got away from it. I got in more into the social scene, got into the work scene, and I just didn't really ride my bike anymore. And now here's this gal who really doesn't want to do anything but ride her bike. And she's like, you should ride your bike. And so I started riding my bike again. And that's something that we totally have hung on to. And it's something that we super enjoy together. And I don't know if I would be doing that on a regular basis if it weren't for her. I don't know if I would be going camping and doing all these crazy adventures and continuing to drive cross country and just do all these things that she's totally into and I'm totally into, but had gotten away from. So it's been really great. I mean, we've been together for I don't well, like 19 years now, and she completely changed my life. Just put me back to where I was, got me away from where I was going. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's huge, man. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Relationships, I mean, just people who have better halves or not, but just relationships in general are. I think that goes back to kind of letting that in a little bit, letting that defense down a little bit, and allowing different perspectives to come in and encourage you to go forward with things either you were loving at one point in time in your life or new experiences. That's so cool. Do you guys have like you got like a bucket list of places you want to go and travel and do and see, or do you have like you guys always lay out goals with the bike maybe, or I don't know.
It's pretty endless, really. I mean, she really wants to go and like ride motorcycles across the continent of Africa,
Nice.
where I tend to be more like, there's still so much to discover in the United States, honey, you know? But like we definitely want to, we've never been to Europe together. She's been there
Cool.
for work and I've been there for work, but we've never been there together for fun. So that's huge on the list. Uh, Her family is huge into fly fishing, so they got me into fly fishing, and that just opens up a list of extraordinary places like South America, Labrador, Alberta. That just and even in the lower 48, like Idaho, Montana, or head up to Alaska. Like these are all just open doors for us. Um, yeah, so I can't even. That's the hard thing. Like I don't even know where to begin. There's so many great places to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but that's cool though. Like, there's a goal and a list of places that's maybe gonna happen, maybe not gonna happen. But I still think that's awesome. Um, you mentioned too also that you were kind of a not along the lines of your relationship with Roxanne, but just the fact that you are a horrible self promoter. I can't fathom that. It's hard for me to see you as that. I know I mentioned earlier kind of the dark horse and the way that you approach the empathy and the humility aspect of presenting data.
Data.
But the but the horrible self promoter, I don't see you as that. So it's interesting that you kind of do.
Oh yeah, I mean it even goes back to the when I was a competitive snowboarder. Like we had this guy Bob Basil, who was a good friend of mine, and he was the voice for us. Like we were just a bunch of riders who, this is the mid '90s, mid late '90s when the threshold for being a great rider was a lot lower than it is right now. But we were pretty good. We were competitive, and he was the voice. He could talk. He wasn't afraid to get in a room with people and ask for things. And like none of us were willing to do that, especially me. I just never really felt comfortable even asking for like a pro form, I mean,
Mm,
from a snowboard company, like, hey, so you think you can like maybe give me a deal on a snowboard? Like with everything that I've done for terrain parks, and here I will promote myself for a second, but like
there you
22
go.
years of
Do it.
of of really being an industry person who has fought for so much and embedded myself in the National Skiers Association and Cutters Camp, and like trained hundreds of people and worked at dozens of resorts and spread that knowledge and made things better. I don't even like asking for a discount on a lift ticket. Like I go and pay full price all the time. And even if I
Yeah.
if I know people at the resort, I'm just like, well, yeah, no, I'm happy to support the business. You guys, here's $100. So no, I'm just not good at it. And
Well,
I've always wanted my actions just to kind of speak for themselves, and that's just the way I've operated, I guess.
no, there you go. Yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth. I think I was going to ask you if that was because you think that actions speak for themselves, maybe louder than words. If you were to just say,
Yeah,
"Hey, I'm going to go do," yeah,
absolutely. And those are the, people that I've endeared myself to kind of operate the same way. There's been better promoters that have worked for me, better people that are better at promoting themselves than I am for sure. Most of them are.
mm,
But ultimately, like when somebody comes and tells me how great they are at running a snowcat, I know that they're really not that great.
ooh, that's a good point.
Yeah, no, you just
That's a
don't.
really good
The
point.
people who are good at it, like they don't talk about it. Like Mike Bennell didn't talk about how awesome he is at running a snowcat. Peter Colombo didn't talk about how great he is at running a snowcat. He talked about, yeah, I built stuff and I went and rode it the next day, and then I went and made it better. Like that's what you do.
Yeah, and speaking of making it better, this is where like I find it hard to tie in the horrible self-promoter, and maybe I can now just after you said it and the word self being in there instead of industry promoter,
Mhm.
because with what you were doing and how you're involved with ASTM, um, I feel like your advocation is for the industry as a whole. So that's where maybe I can draw the line between, wow, this guy is really all about the industry and not about himself. Does that make sense? I
Yeah,
guess.
totally. And I'll just spin that out on you because, like, I do a bunch of expert witness work where I testify on behalf of ski resorts that are getting sued for people that get hurt in terrain parks. And then I do ASTM. And selfishly, I'm doing that so that I can continue to do the work that I ultimately love to do. And I've always approached it in that way, like, hey guys, like we're going to lose this opportunity if somebody doesn't step up and take control of it. And ASTM is a perfect example of that. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, the it's basically the organization. It's a nonprofit organization that develops standards for all kinds of things, testing and materials. It's the American Society for Testing of Materials. So things like plastics and tensile strength of different types of alloys and like these kinds of things that you see every day all have an ASTM standard. And the way it's been involved with the ski industry, the main way that it's been involved is with the release settings on your bindings, the DIN settings on ski bindings. That was an ASTM developed standard. So like back in the 70s when there were tons of ACL injuries and lower leg fracture injuries because bindings didn't release, this committee basically was formed to say like, how can we cut down on these injuries? And they developed the releasable binding and said like to the manufacturers, if you're going to build a binding, it has to be releasable and it has to be releasable to these specifications. And then they said to the ski areas, like, this is how you test the releasability of these bindings using these tools. And these are the measurements that you have to abide by. And they cut down on this tremendous problem, really, because they standardized it. And then back, it's like 2011, they formed a new committee under new projects that said, hey, should we look at freestyle terrain jumping features? And it started to kind of gain some momentum. And it was really being driven by academics and engineers from outside the industry who truly believed that there was a problem and like people were getting maimed on these jumps that we were building. So I was asked to get involved, and so I joined, the committee, and it became a formal committee in 2017. So now it's a legit standard writing committee that I was nominated to become the chairperson for. And ultimately, that's the way that it needed to go, because if you let some of these outside academics drive the train, they're just using like ballistic trajectory physics to determine what a jump shape should be. If you can wrap your brain around that, like rolling a soccer ball down the hill and like what does the jump make it do? As if the human jumper has absolutely no control over what the outcome is going to be. And so
Yeah. Yeah. Adding that variable in there, I think, is going to tie it. Yeah, that's fantastic. I was going to ask you if you had one. That's perfect.
yeah, so like the history of ASTM is really it has to be industry driven, and so the industry has to be involved because we have to develop standards that work for us, for the industry. And so I became the chair of that and put together a writing committee. And so we developed the first part of this. Basically, we're kind of following the NSAA's lead on this, the National Ski Areas Association lead. So you remember, like back in 2015, NSAA presented a glossary of terms for the anatomy of a jump. Things like defining what lip means, defining what
Yep.
knuckle means, defining what deck means. And they put out this glossary of terms. And then they put out like a measuring practice, like this is how you measure a jump to standard, or like they call it best practices. ASTM would call it a standard. So we're kind of following their lead. So the first part of the standard we wrote was a glossary of terms. And then it goes through like this very formal committee balloting process where, you know, it has to be unanimously approved, and it only gets voted on every 6 months, and it takes forever. So 2 years ago, we actually voted in the glossary of terms as a standard. So there is an ASTM standard for freestyle terrain jumping features right now, and it consists of a glossary of terms.
Wow.
So then the next step, we're working on developing a measuring standard, just like NSAA did, but they don't call it a standard. To say like, okay, we all need to be able to measure a jump the same way so that we can collect the same data. So that
Data.
so that we're all collecting data that we can compare one jump to another using the same measurements. And that we've been on that for a couple of years now. So we're working on that right now. And then the next step is, okay, so now we can define the components, we can measure the components. Now let's collect a bunch of data and see what the commonalities are between these jumps. Now, the other opposite approach that's coming from the other side, and this is why it's so important that we drive this, is that they're designing jumps in two-dimensional programs on computers, and using some very sophisticated physics, math, to predict outcomes for the jumper. And they're saying like you need to have an equivalent fall height of less than 1.5 meters at any point. So they're designing jumps that basically at any speed you can hit, you will never fall more than 1.5 meters in equivalence. And my personal approach is that I think as a whole, like we're all doing really, really well. And just to go back to that Instagram thing, like because we all can see what each other are doing, like jump design in the last 10 years has just become so amazing. Like the jumps that I see every day, they don't look exactly the same, but they all have like kind of operate under the same principles. And I think they're safer by so much more dramatically safer than they were 20 years ago, because we are all working together without having to use this math and physics. We know in our gut what works and what doesn't. And so how do we develop a standard like jump design concept that allows for the flexibility to build different size jumps in different circumstances on different slopes that fall within this sort of standard analysis, but don't lock us into one thing? And that's, you know, the huge challenge. So for me, like the goal would be to develop a set of tools to say like, here's a jump. You want to build a 50-foot jump on a 12-degree pitch. This is what you've got for a parent slope. This is what you've got for snow. This is the landing you can achieve. Like, how tall should the takeoff be? Like, what should the length of the takeoff be before it gets to 27 degrees at the lip? You know, like there are formulas that do exist there, and I think we're all abiding by them without even really knowing, you know? So it's just a matter of like distilling that down and almost reverse engineering what we're already doing, and then saying like, here's an easier way to do it. So
yeah, and see, that's where that dark horse title kind of comes out right there, because horrible self-promoter crossing over into industry advocate. Yeah, that totally just came together. And I remember very vividly, I know we caught up about one of the meetings that I actually attended in Denver during an SIA.
Mm-hmm.
And Rosie looking at me and going, hey, so that dude right there is who you want to pay attention to. You know, that's the guy that you, and I was like, who is that? And he was like, that's Elia Hamilton. Just watch. Just sit, watch. You don't have to talk, just say anything, just watch. And what you just told me was exactly how you defended every single park operator, every single resort out there, um, through that last sentence. Pretty much, ultimately, what we would like to be able to do, and I'm paraphrasing, but what we would like to be able to do is not be confined. We don't want to be constrained. We want to still be able to create at will with all kinds of shapes, but understand that we need to be safe. I think would maybe be the right word to put it.
Yeah, no, I truly believe that we're already doing it. I mean, I don't think there's a problem. That's the whole thing, but other people do, and they honest and I respect their beliefs. I respect that they don't understand the human factors associated with building terrain parks, and that's the technical term of, the science of human behavior. But there are human factors and there's demand, and this is a business. So we can't just like build a cookie cutter jump with a starting point where everybody has to start at the same point. And, or if you're 12 years old and 50 pounds, you start here. Or if you're 45 and 210 pounds, you start here. Like, that's not what the demand is. That's not what people want. So we have to keep building things that work for all of those people without allowing ourselves to get confined. And honestly, it's kind of time to grow up. Like, sorry, everybody, but yeah, you kind of got to grow up and have a really good reason for doing what you're doing.
Yep. Yeah. In the world of blame, claim, and shame, you got to be able to at least, I mean, that's probably the most blunt way I could put it. But in that world, I think you've got to be able to have an answer for what you're going out there to do. In the words of
Yeah.
In the words of J.P. Martin, you got to be able to take off the Imagineering goggles. Straight up.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
you just do. And maybe that's really a good segue into. I'm trying to pick everybody's brain on just different aspects of leadership. Maybe who you had that were some good examples, but what it looks like for you. And I mean, I know you just unpacked a lot about how you're being a massive advocate for the industry, but to get to that point, you were absorbing everything at a young age with respect to who you were around, but maybe people in leadership roles, who were you around that had an impact on you?
Frankly, I hate to say it, and I think we're probably going to touch on this later, but if you get into the boys club and they like you, then they'll probably let you do some stuff. So, um, and then more recently, I mean, my last boss, and I'm not kissing his ass because I don't work for him anymore, but um, Jesse Boyd, with Peak Resorts, he was the best boss I've ever had. And not just because of how he treated me, but how he treated the team and the people that he put in place. He put the right people in the right places, and then he believed in them because he put them there, and then he pushed them, and ultimately just made them feel like part of a family. He had a way of listening and making his crew feel like a part of something that I've tried to emulate since then. Like, I would walk onto the same job site as Jesse when we were doing construction work or anything really, and people would just gravitate towards him. And I'd be like, well, actually, I'm in charge, like, this is my crew. I put you guys all together, but why do you love Jesse so much?
Yeah.
And that's and that's because, he listened to them, and he was never in a hurry. Like, if somebody had a story to tell him, he would stay there until it was done. There was never anything more important than that person in that moment. And that makes people feel good, and they want that, and they want more of that. And at the same time, like, and I feel like I live this too, but he's in the ditch with you, and I've always been in the ditch with my crew, and I would never ask them to do anything that I wouldn't do, which is such a cliche, but it's absolutely true.
Do you think that multitasking is something you got to be able to do as a leader? Do you have to perfect that? Or is listening and, like you're saying, stopping, taking the time to absorb, and then moving on once you have all the info more important?
I definitely have matured in that, and being able to compartmentalize all of the bazillion things that are going on in my head while somebody
Mm.
is like seeming to talk to me endlessly. Um, and to not start looking around, and like actually not paying attention to the person because I'm thinking about what I need to do next. That's a really hard thing for me to do.
Mm.
Um, and I've had to work on that over the years. Like I've got so many things that I need to accomplish that day, and my brain is just spinning. And here's this person telling me about, you know, what a rough night they had last night, and like the last thing I care about is what their night was like. But it's important to them, and ultimately, it should be important to me to pay attention to that, and I need to compartmentalize all the things that are going on in my head and not try to be multitasking at that moment, you know?
Yeah, it's almost as if you're trying to just quiet all the noise in your head just a little bit, or most of it, because that line that you just gave was incredible. If somebody had a really shitty night and you need to get all the information out of what happened and what went down, that person's going to value you listening to them so much than if you didn't listen, and then they're going right back into the same scenario again because maybe you couldn't give them any feedback um, based on the listening you were able to provide. I just
Yeah,
think,
for sure. And at the
yeah.
risk of making it sound like you're using that as a tool,
Mm,
it almost is. The tool of generating loyalty
there
is
you go.
important, whether you care or not. It's important. So, and all of these things, all these leadership, not like the best leaders I've ever had, and the people that I've tried to emulate are generating loyalty through their actions. Things like being responsible for getting the tools the team needs to be effective. Like that's the job. You're not there for people to do work for you. You're there to help people do their work. That's the best leadership quality you can have, you know. And I
Yep.
think being present is also one of the most important aspects of a good leader. Like
Mm.
being present, not being like at the end of the day, like, oh, how'd it go today? No, like
Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
expect you to check in with me. I don't expect you to tell me how to do my job, but I expect you to check in with me throughout the day and be like, hey man,
Mm,
how's it going? It's
yeah.
going good? Great. Awesome. I'll
Yeah.
talk to you later. Oh, it's going
Yeah.
bad, poorly? What do you need from me? Like, can I
Mm.
get you something? You know, even if
Is
it's a
li-
coffee
is
and a breakfast sandwich.
exactly is listening being present? Is present being listening? Those two go hand in hand.
I think you need to be physically present. I really do. I believe that in the construction world and in the like terrain park building world, like you need to be there at least a couple times a day. You don't get to just walk away. It just and I've had so many leaders that I've worked with over the years who aren't present. They just ask you like, "Is it done yet?" Um, and I have no patience for that. It doesn't work for me at all. I expect my leader to set basic expectations and not back off from that and check in with me, and make sure that I have what I need to get the job done. And that's what I try to do too. So
Yeah, because in this, and you hit it right nail on the head again. In this digital world, in the current climate that we're in, can you be present in a Zoom room? I mean, I don't think so, but that's my opinion. I think you can be physically present, but I don't know if you can be present in a Zoom box. I just throwing that out there, but I loved your comment on being present is physical presence.
my wife actually came up with a great analogy. Like we don't say I didn't have time anymore. Like there's no such thing as I didn't have time to do something. It's I didn't make time for that. So when somebody says to me like, "Oh, I didn't have time to come by today, sorry." What I'm thinking is, no, what I was doing wasn't a priority to you, and you didn't make time to check in with me. So you've just clarified that, your priorities are different. And so I try not to ever say that as that's a leadership quality that I just believe is important. And I can be honest with somebody like, "Hey, man, I didn't make the time to come up there today, and I will do better." But I'll never say like, "Oh my god, I was so busy. Holy cow, like my day's been fucked." No,
Yeah.
that's just lame. Nobody cares.
Yeah. I think before we get too far along in this, Elia, I definitely want to jump into the push road question of the day because it's a good one. I definitely want to know the answer, and I think you'll be excited. I think you'll be
Oh
excited
boy.
to hear what it is. And I'll play. Let's roll that intro.
The push road question of the day.
That is right. The push road question of the day is really an opportunity for all the listeners, whether you're an operator, somebody who's not operating at all, you're a fan of the show, you're tuned in. Either way, we're stoked to have you contribute. You can send us your questions directly through social media. Send us a DM, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and anything really is up for grabs here for topics of conversation. So, Elia, today's push road question of the day is from Chelsea Simani.
Right on, Chelsea.
And Chelsea asks, what is Nika's job and how does she help you accomplish this?
Nika is my dog. She's a beautiful 2-year-old German Shepherd that I got as a puppy. My first dog as an adult. So I grew up with dogs, but I didn't feel like I was mature enough to get my own until I was 43. And her job has been to bring me back down to earth, literally and figuratively. She takes a tremendous amount of effort. We put a ton of work into training her so that she's a good German Shepherd, not a scary one. And she has gotten me outside hiking and, being a part of the outdoors um, on a recreational level for a minimum of 2 hours every day for the last year and a half or so. So that's her job. I told my doctor I've lost a bunch of weight since I got her, and he's like, "Wow, you're doing really great." I'm like, "Yeah, well, you never like prescribed the dog. You should have just told me to get a dog, and everything would be fine." So she's my fitness coach, I guess. That's her job. Yeah.
Wow. So, okay. So, fitness coach, and she's there supporting you. What are some of the things that are maybe beyond what you've already told us for your routine that you guys do that are pretty cool?
Um, well, yeah, for like I try to have her with me as much as possible, but I actually built like a trail network behind my house basically for her so that I didn't have to leave the house to take her for long walks. Um, and yeah, I mean, she's given me a level of responsibility that I haven't had. Frankly, I've been so focused on work and just use that as my excuse to basically let go of anything else to say like, well, I'm just dedicated to my career. And now I have this animal that actually requires quite a bit of focus, and it's grounded me quite a bit. So it's super cool.
Yeah, that is super cool. And I was really kind of taken back by the question. So big shout out to Chelsea. I'm not sure on the connection there. If you want to elaborate, you can. But I thought it was really cool because a lot of
Yeah,
times,
Chelsea grooms part time and patrols part time at Mount Snow, and she's been one of those kind of inspirational people that just through her enthusiasm for being a part of it, has worked her way up. Like she was working up at the Summit Lodge, um, bartending and serving food up there, kind of running the Summit Lodge bar, and so she got the keys to the food cat, and then the grooming department didn't have to deal with it because Chelsea came and moved all the food up onto the summit on Friday nights and whatever other night she did. And then she came in and said, "Hey, I'd like to groom," and she's grooming. It's pretty rad. I know she's still bartending like full time, so she can only groom a couple nights a week, but it's just super rad.
well, I want to meet Nika one day for sure. So hopefully I get the chance. But
She's the
that is
greatest.
that is awesome,
Yeah.
man. Well, Elia, thanks so much for participating in the push road question of the day, and huge shout out again to Chelsea for the question.
Thanks, Chelsea.
the snow industry as a whole has often been referred to as a bit of a boys' club, and I just think, very bluntly asked, do you agree? And if so, why?
Yeah, for sure. Because when you look around the executive room at conferences, you see a bunch of old white guys sharing war stories, and I mean, they're totally amazing stories. Like I'm captivated by sitting around and listening to like, oh, these things that happened in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, and it's super entertaining. But we kind of need to step away from that. I could very easily become one of those guys. I mean, my hair is already kind of gray. Um, but thankfully, my good friend Ken Gator and I have a pact that we will shoot each other if we ever turn into that. So,
Dude, that's heavy. But
yeah,
I think your point is it's very serious. Like, hearing the stories they're great, but where's the progress? You know? Where do you see that
yeah,
falling in? Where's the change come through?
yeah. And I mean, I think that I've always responded well to female leaders, through my life. I think that's what I grew up with. So I don't, I, I'm totally into it and I really appreciate it. And I would rather have more women involved. I can't speak from personal experiences what the obstacles have been, but it is changing. I mean, just to be on the optimistic side, it is definitely changing. I mean, Kelly Pollock is the president of the National Skiers Association now, and she's amazing. And she is already changing the character of that. She doesn't build silos, which I think is a word that she would use. Silos being you build yourself up with the people underneath you, and you don't have a lot of individual character to that structure. It's very very people that are basically just like you. She doesn't do that. She doesn't have a club. She looks people in the eye and she takes them for their merit, not their reputation or their cool stories. So I'm excited about that from a very high level in the ski industry, to see what she's going to accomplish. So there are also definitely more women in leadership roles, general manager roles, positions of power. It's changed quite a bit in the last 10 years, and so that's super exciting to see. I think that there's actually a lot less like drama associated with female leaders in my experience, like kind of the opposite of what everybody says in the real world, I guess. But I almost feel sometimes like uncomfortable pontificating about it because who am I? I'm a white dude from Western Mass who has had a pretty privileged life and have been part of the boys club for sure. Like I've been the one of the guys like chuckling in that room in the creepy boys club way. I have no idea what it feels like to be on the other side of that. But I would love to see more women get involved in the industry. Women operators like Chelsea. I mean, I don't understand or have a good enough understanding of what the barriers are because frankly, like I haven't had a lot of women apply to the jobs that I've had available. Like it's really really rare. And I know that's a super lame excuse and I'm probably going to get chastised for that, but I hired a gal named Debbie Bernstein, and if you're listening, Debbie, piston bully girl, I hope you are, but she was my right hand for a few years at Mount Snow when I was running grooming there, and she's still grooming there part time, a couple nights a week. So I'm just super stoked to see that. But there was, I didn't understand really why there weren't more coming in. Is there just like this barrier to entry that I'm not even aware of? And I would like to learn about that and be more aware of what that barrier is. Think about all the talent we're leaving on the table. Like it's you never know until you open the door. I mean, there could be the best operators in the world still haven't walked through the door yet because they don't feel comfortable to do that. I do feel like our generation, the new generation of leadership that's coming up, has a different perspective than what has historically been the case, for sure. And so I'm enthusiastic about that in more ways than one.
Yeah. How do you think we push that? How do you think we and just make it I don't want to use the word safer, but I want to use the word more inclusive. How do you think we project that message out there loud and proud for everybody to yeah, we're on a podcast talking about it, but how can you on your daily routine project it so that it's a daily piece? How do you get that out there?
I don't know how you shout it, from the hilltop, but live it, I guess. You just be inclusive and don't close the door on anybody and say, take people at their merit or their attitude. I mean, the enthusiasm and the attitude and the passion for the sport is ultimately why we hire people. Like, because you don't do this job if if you're in it for the money. We all know that.
I've got another guest question, and it applies to this topic. So I'm gonna play it for you now.
Okay.
Hamilton, it's Gator. So, two-part question. First part, I know you're aware that we have a pact that we made many years ago that if one of us turns into the crotchety old operations guy that we fought against as we were coming up through the business, we would shoot each other or the one who does it first. So, how do you maintain your creative influences and stay fresh and remind yourself how not to be that guy? Second question, which one of us do you think is going to get shot first? Love you, man. Bye.
Oh, I love that, man. I just have to say it.
Gosh, take it away. I can't wait to hear this.
Okay, I'll answer the second part of the question first. I think that I'm going to get shot first, for sure, because Ken Gator is the most open-minded and he has no preconceptions about anybody. And he is deep in it down at Snowshoe for sure, running mountain operations at Snowshoe. So if you can think of any person in the world that could turn into that crotchety old mountain ops guy, it's the guy running mountain operations in West Virginia with a big long beard. I mean, he is it. But at the same time, he's the most open-minded and inclusive person. He doesn't judge anybody unless they're just an asshole. And he'll judge them pretty quickly. But all inclusive, I'm getting shot first for sure. So how do I battle that? It takes a lot of work. Like, I need to back off my instinct to say things like, we've done that before. It's the way we've always done it. That's a stupid idea. There are certainly some cases where that applies, but in other cases, giving people the tools and the autonomy to accomplish things the way that they want to accomplish them. And in parks, I feel like I've actually done okay in not holding people back from expressing themselves because, again, Gator really kind of instilled that in me, like, hey, man, let me do my thing. Trust me. And if I hired you, then that means that I trust you. Like, I'm not going to hire you if I don't trust you. So taking a deep breath, taking a step back and saying, it's going to be okay. I don't have to micromanage this. They got their different way of doing things, and I'm going to step back and let them do it. I have to try to do that every single day for sure.
You are dubbed by him as the white tiger that's hard to nail down. Like you're more of an everything to everybody. You're not necessarily broadcasting it out there for everybody to hear, but you're intricate and you're empathetic and you're a simplifier. You're not a complicator. Do you agree with that? I think that would be cool to know. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but that tiger line I thought was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, for sure. Actually, I'm going to send you a picture of a jacket that I had made.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure. White Tiger is it was my radio handle and also a label that I've been given. Um, and it can be taken either way. Like I don't think I'm some kind of majestic creature by any means. It's just hilarious because it really speaks to like the way that I behave at work every day. I don't really open up my emotions. I don't. I can be kind of elusive and aloof, and I can disappear really fast too. I'm really pretty good at that. So that's the white tiger in me for sure.
Managing employees who are, I don't know, always building, or are they leading from somewhere other than the snowcat? But is the manager doing that? Is the manager the employee who is always building, or are they leading from somewhere other than the snowcat?
Yeah, I guess I've always believed that the manager of a terrain park department anyway should be the kind of lead builder. That's just been my philosophy. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just feel like those are the keys to the castle, and that's what drives the show is what's out on the hill. Um, and being able to have that skill set really it creates accountability, it creates respect for that person and the department, and it's frankly I think it's more productive. Like I'm not a big proponent of office work. I got I got really proficient at office work. I got really good at office work for the same reasons I got good at running a snowcat because I wanted to spend as little time as possible in the office. So I got good at being fast. Um, I wanted to spend my time in the snowcat instead, but I just don't. I don't think it's talking about things is as productive as actually doing them personally.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Yep. Very good point. So do you think that, just kind of along the lines of that, do you think that that's definitely led to, I wouldn't use the word missed opportunities, but you didn't get them in that sense of the word of it, climbing the ladder because you were in the machine managing?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I was less willing to go to the meetings and I was less willing to play the game of being in that boys club. Like it's just not I didn't see it as being productive. And I know for sure that my resume doesn't look as tidy or my demeanor in general. I just don't have a lot of tolerance for that stuff. So it's definitely held me back. Like, would I be a general manager right now? Yeah, probably. But if that meant that I had to sacrifice being a field leader, like, no thanks. I don't really care. Not interested.
What Yeah, what if I put it like this? If you play the politics and you play the game, do you feel like you're sacrificing a piece of your authenticity because you're being less of yourself?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, that's definitely one way to put it. Have I ever thought about it like that? No, I think it's just like that's who I am. I'm not I'm a horrible self promoter, and I'm not interested in playing the game if it means that I'm sacrificing my authenticity. Just I really believe in what I do, and I'm not willing to play some kind of weird game to to get fame and power. Like just my fame and power comes from like I just built an awesome jump, and those kids are stoked. Like I'm famous, and look at how powerful I am to create that experience for them. It's that's it.
Well, I mean, we've really talked about some awesome topics, and we've covered some deep topics too, some deep blade dives. But I really want your take on what it looks like to plan and or come up with the best plan for success in the terrain park department.
Well, I mean, really, first you have to come up with a plan. So
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
that's what I think is the first thing. Like, think about the component parts of what needs to be accomplished. I've always liked to kind of work backwards. So, if we're talking about coming up with a plan for today, for tomorrow, for next week, next month, next year, like, let's start at the end of the goal. So, like, I want to build this park and I want it open on Friday so we can have a soft opening before the madness on Saturday. So like today's Monday. Okay, so I need to be done with this on Friday at 8 a.m. what's it going to take me to get to that point? So where do I want to be on Thursday so that I'm comfortable going into Friday? Where do I want to be on Wednesday so I'm comfortable going into Thursday? And you can kind of apply that to like short-term, hourly planning to long-term, like 5-year planning, really, if you approach it from that way. And I think then you say, okay, so what do I need to get from today to tomorrow to be to where I need to be tomorrow so that I can be where I need to be the next day? Yeah, I think that we all kind of get bogged down in this like creative vortex. Like, I gotta take it to the next level, dude. That's what it's all about. Like, no, dude, you gotta get it done, man. Actually, that's the goal. Like, we gotta have it open. So, what are you gonna do right now to get to that point? And without complicating it too much, you can break it down into steps. Say, like, okay, so tomorrow I want to have all my snowmaking managed or my natural snow consolidated, farmed, whatever. So how many cats do I need to do that? I need 3. Okay. Can I have 3 cats? Yes. No. No, you can't have 3 cats. Okay, we're going to do this then. And you change what your outcome needs to be based on that. So it's goals, outcome goals, resources, planning. Like it's, and really a lot of that, like I learned so much from getting into the construction side of things because that is just legit. Like you have to have your excavating done before the concrete guy comes. Well, the concrete guy's coming on Friday, or the helicopter's coming on Friday. Let's put it into bigger perspective. And that helicopter is going to cost you $10,000 an hour. So, like, if you don't make that deadline, you're done. So, you figure out how to get to that point. I mean, we're not talking about that scale, obviously, with park building or even like just getting trails opened, but why not think about it that way? Like, just get it done. So, anyway, rambling. Come up with a plan.
Yeah, no. I don't think it's rambling at all. I think it's all very relevant. They're all very relevant points. I think your best one that you have, though, is understanding your guests and what the demand is. And then basically on top of that, only build what you can maintain.
Yeah, so know what your goal is, and that is generally to sell lift tickets. So, what's going to sell lift tickets? Who are you building for? Are you building for your 3 bros that are going to buy you beers at the bar when you're done? Like, yeah, that feels pretty good. And hey, man, if that's what you want to do and that's your goal in life, then awesome. But if you want to get anywhere and be a professional, like you need to think about the business side too and figure out what your guests want. There is definitely, and I don't mean to discount like the marketing component for sure, like building really cool creative stuff that only a few people can ride has a lot of value, but it's not your bread and butter ultimately at the end of the day. And then if you're building the skate park on the mountain for the day-to-day guest, you will quickly realize like you can't maintain that unless you have a real ace in the hole operator who's going to be there every night. So unless you decide that that's going to be you every night taking care of it, you might just need to kind of rethink that strategy a little bit. But the one thing that drives me, I have 2 huge pet peeves when it comes to like really being productive and offering quality product, and that is lost keys and dead batteries. Those 2 things drive me absolutely through the roof because they're 2 basic things, and I think they just speak to like taking care of your equipment. So keep your machines clean, take care of them. They are your tools. Like, what do you do without that? You're going to throw your Mountain Dew cans over in the passenger side all night? Like, come on, dude. Yeah. Have some self-respect.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think those are all valid points. It's your office, and you got to take care of it, and you share it with somebody else. So you should respect that space too.
One thing I wanted to comment actually on your closing statement to fuel your cats and shovel them off.
Yes,
I think you need to add and fill the DEF tank, motherfucker. Everybody hates DEF, but DEF is like totally a part of life. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
Don't fill your DEF tank.
No, fill your DEF tank for sure. And I say that at the end of the show, and I have been totally guilty of that, which is why I say it. You can't not have ever not fueled your cat or put DEF in it. You've made that mistake before, and you have definitely been portrayed as the asshole, the dick, the punk,
sure.
whatever. But
Yeah.
when you do that, you get the heat from the next shift the next day. I mean, that's just how it goes.
Oh yeah, and it becomes like a long-term reputation. Like you can't live that down for like a year.
So yeah, you're right. You're hit again right on point with taking care of things, and maybe that's a reflection of maturity or age. I don't know, but I definitely would be interested in your perspective on whether managing snowcat operators is often like managing children, and what your thoughts
Well,
are there.
I think it's like they're like 12. I think is probably more age appropriate. They're like 12-year-olds because they're smart enough to know how to manipulate and mess with you, but not mature enough to behave like responsible adults. And like even when I was the boss, they would try to, and I tell people like leaders that are coming in, like mountain managers and stuff, like, how come the groomers give me such a hard time? And I think they're lying to me. And I'm like, they are totally lying to you because they know you don't know any better. Like, they can tell you that something wasn't possible because they know that you don't actually know how to do it. And groomers are like notorious for that. I don't know what it is, but it's like, oh no, see, the flux capacitor wasn't flipped the right way last night, and then we had that transition snow right around 11:25, and you're just like, oh well, yeah, well I can't argue with that. How am I supposed to know? I wasn't here, and I don't know how to groom. So,
Yeah.
but they're lying.
Yeah.
They were smoking cigarettes and playing cribbage for
But
2
I went
hours.
and looked at that flux capacitor. I went and tried to locate the flux capacitor quickly. It's on the left side of the machine, right below the master switch. You just push that button.
But I love them. I love them all. They've all been so great, and I appreciate. Like, I never took it personally. Like, I totally get it. And again, I think that comes from growing up in the restaurant business. Like, it's hazing. That's part of the deal. Not saying it's good. I'm definitely not promoting hazing. Okay, just to go back to the boys club conversation, but I get it. I just don't want to be that guy that's doing the hazing now. Like, I get it. I know where you're coming from. I appreciate and respect the job you do night after night. I appreciate that you've been doing it for so long, and you do have a lot of knowledge, and you've experienced a lot of gnarly things and a lot of cool things. But I also know what it's like to do it in all conditions, in all kinds of equipment. Like, I can run the same cats you can, man, and I'll go out and do the same job. So I just don't really see the point of giving people a hard time. Like, let's make it better.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of that inclusive piece, like maybe making sure that we are realizing that there are bigger fish to fry. Make your point all you want to. That's cool, but is it really? Instead of doing that, why don't we just let people in and let them know the reality of the situation, which is, hey man or gal, you don't know all the answers, and that's okay. But just come and hang out with us for a little bit. We'd appreciate it. We'd love to have you come and jump in a machine and be sick. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, what's other than equipment challenges, like what's the number one complaint that I hear from managers? I can't find help. Can't find good help. Well, what are the barriers to that? Like, what are you doing to actually make it to find that good help? And is good help what you think good help is? Do they have to be like a 20-year equipment operator? Or can they be somebody with a fresh perspective that you can train the skills to, but you can't train attitude. You can train skills. So hire for attitude, enthusiasm, like get them in the door. I can teach you how to run a snowcat all day. Like, no problem. It's not that complicated.
No, it's fun too. It's definitely fun. Wicked fun.
Wicked fun. If you're
definitely into it, it's wicked fun for sure. Maybe along the training lines and what you've kind of mentioned for just letting people in. What does the future look like? I would be really interested to know your perspective because you've plugged yourself into so many different facets within this industry. I really want to know what Elia Hamilton thinks the future in the snow industry looks like.
Oh man, I think I love like that the park guys and gals are taking over the ski industry, and I think that that's going to bring, like, just even thinking about it makes my heart rate increase a little bit. Like it's not just about like building features everywhere and building the raddest parks. It's about an approach to the sport of sliding down mountains on snow, and our kind of how we have all had to adapt and come up with our own ways of doing things because we didn't get the help, and we did have to kind of do it on our own and figure it out. If you think about like terrain park world, every terrain park manager that I know has had to be kind of an overall leader. It's not just about like, okay, I'm going to have my crew and we're going to go build jumps and we're going to take care of them. No, you have to integrate with lifts and ski patrol and the grooming department, snowmaking. In Carinthia's case, like even the manager at Carinthia was basically responsible for making sure the base lodge was running appropriately back in the day. Like, because it was all part of it. We had our, like it's, so you become this kind of overall leader that has to look outside of your little box of jump building and see what's the experience like for my people that are coming here. And they're coming here because of a product that I'm supplying, but then there's like a barrier to that product because the parking lot's not plowed. Like, oh, I have to make sure the parking lot's plowed. So these people are coming up in the business right now. Guys like Jay Scambio, over at Loon, perfect example. Who's going to take that job seriously and be a very good leader, but he's not going to get bogged down by the old ways or the old boys club. He's going to have a completely fresh perspective on providing the best experience possible for the guest. And I think that's super exciting. And I think there's a lot of leaders out there like that. Dave Franzen, he's a general manager at Donner Ski Ranch, Jay Ridd at Diamond Peak, another great example. People taking these kind of leadership roles that have come up with just true passion for the sport. And that's ultimately what I'm excited about, is just the passion for solving the problems and just making it happen. And I think that comes from our people.
Well, Elia, I really can't thank you enough for joining us on the Blade Dive today. It's been a very humbling listen and experience for myself. And I know there are all kinds of points within your conversation with me that I know people can grab onto and be excited about. So thank you for taking the time, man.
Man, I so appreciate that you put this podcast together, and there's no podcast that's been as exciting to me, because I think having the opportunity to tell our stories and feel like part of a community is it's just so amazing. And it's a really small world once you start putting it all together. So thank you so much. I'm humbled.
Huge shout out to Elia Hamilton. Thank you, sir, for your time. I really enjoyed catching up with you and getting to know you a little more too. Before we get out of here, just a quick reminder, if you haven't already followed the podcast, please do so. It would mean a lot to me. And if you've just got a quick minute out of your day and you don't even want to write the review, leave us a 5-star. Something that really does help out the show, I promise. Follow us on social media at The Blade Dive on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you're creating images and posting them, don't forget to use the hashtag The Blade Dive. All right, you know the deal. Don't be a dick. Please fill up your machine at the end of your shift, as well as the def tank.